For the first time all season, Ferrari is about to rip a piece off its own car on purpose. That piece is the blown exhaust flap Hamilton and Leclerc have run at every race, the one that presses the rear of the SF26 into the corners. Reports out of Italy say it goes in the bin for Spa, because on the longest straights in Formula 1, it is quietly costing them 7 horsepower. 7 horsepower Hamilton has been begging for since Austria. So why give something up to go faster? Here is the number that forces the decision. On the long straights, this Ferrari is running around 0.6 of a second slower than the Mercedes in a straight line, not 0.6 across a whole lap. 0.6 on the straights alone. Hamilton pulls onto those straights, gets to the top end, and the Mercedes simply drive away from him while he sits there, foot flat, with nothing left to give. The engine is fine. The tyres are fine. What keeps running out is electrical power. Ferrari's deployment, in his own words, tails off at the end, while Mercedes just keep going. He has been saying it since Austria, and it has not stopped being true. That is the weakness. And Spa, the track coming next, is the worst possible place in the world to have it, because Spa is not really a circuit. It is one long test of exactly the thing Ferrari is missing. And the fix they are reportedly bringing is not an upgrade, it is a sacrifice. There is a word for what Hamilton has been fighting all season, and it is not a word any engineer would use. Think of a parachute. A drag chute that pops out behind a car and hauls it backward just as it should be pulling away. Nobody at Ferrari calls it that, and you will not find it in a technical drawing. Charles Leclerc even turned the idea into a joke a few weeks back, saying Ferrari would trust Hamilton to skydive onto a track before they trusted him with a parachute. Funny line, but there is a very real drag on the back of that Ferrari, and it has been acting like a chute down every long straight this year. This is the story of what that drag actually is, why it has held one of the greatest drivers in history stuck behind slower cars, and why Ferrari is about to do something drastic to get rid of it. Start with the device itself, because almost nobody watching has actually been told what it does. Ferrari calls it flick tail mode. The rest of the paddock just calls it the blown flap. Low down on the back of the SF26, near where the exhaust exits, there is a small aerodynamic flap that feeds off the engine's own exhaust gases. When Hamilton turns into a corner, that blown air helps seal the airflow over the rear of the car and press it into the track. More rear grip. More confidence to attack a corner without the back of the car stepping out on him. On a twisty circuit, it is a genuine advantage, and Ferrari got there first. That head start did not go unnoticed. The FIA has already decided the whole idea is a little too clever, and it is banning this style of blown flap from 2027. That tells you two things at once. It tells you Ferrari found something clever enough that the rule makers wanted it shut down, and it tells you Ferrari only has one season to squeeze value out of it before the door closes for good. Rival teams have spent the year studying the device, trying to reverse engineer how Ferrari made it work, watching for the moment they could copy it. So Ferrari sits in a strange spot. They own the best version of an idea that is living on borrowed time, and now, on the very track where it hurts them most, they are the ones about to switch it off first. Understand why that feels backward. In Formula 1, teams almost never remove their own clever parts. They add, they refine, they protect. Flicktail mode is the kind of thing engineers fight to keep on the car. It is a genuine edge, a piece of aerodynamic thinking nobody else has fully matched. Choosing to run without it, even for a single weekend, is an admission. It says that on this specific track, the clever part has become a liability, and the smartest thing Ferrari can do is stop being clever and simply go fast in a straight line. But here is the detail everyone missed while admiring the cornering. That same blown flap does not switch itself off on the straight. The air keeps working, the surfaces keep generating load, and load on a straight is not grip, it is drag. It is a hand pressed flat against the back of the car, holding it back. On a track full of corners, the trade is worth it. On a track that is mostly full throttle, the trade turns poisonous. The exact thing that makes the Ferrari strong in the slow parts is the thing punishing it everywhere it needs to be fast. Ferrari's own engineers have put a figure on the cost. Shutting that device down, blanking off the lower part of the exhaust exit, hands back roughly 7 horsepower the flap was eating on the straights. 7 horsepower does not sound like much next to a road car. In Formula 1, at the top of 6th gear, on a straight that runs for well over a kilometre, 7 horsepower is the difference between holding a rival behind you and watching their front wing appear in your mirrors. Think about that for a second. Ferrari built a device to win corners, and it has quietly been taxing them on every straight since the season began. Now the harder truth, and the reason a flap is only half the story. The drag from flick tail mode is real, but it is not the deepest problem. The deepest problem lives inside the power unit, and it has a name Hamilton keeps repeating: Deployment. In plain terms, it works like this. Under the 2026 rules, roughly half of a Formula One car's power now comes from electrical energy. The old system that used to harvest heat off the turbo is gone. What is left is a much bigger electric motor pushing up to 350 kilowatts, fed by a battery that has to be filled mostly under braking. That is nearly 3 times the electrical punch the old cars had, which sounds like a gift until you realize the battery feeding it is the same size it always was. On a normal lap, with plenty of heavy braking zones to recharge, that balance works. On a lap with long straights and very few of those braking zones, the battery simply cannot refill fast enough to keep up with what the motor wants to spend. So the car pours electrical power into the first part of the straight, and then, near the top end, it runs dry. The rules tried to give drivers tools to manage this. There is a manual override, a boost the driver can deploy to attack or defend, and the active aero that lets them pick a low-drag straight-line mode and a high-grip corner mode at the flick of a switch. On the surface, that should let a clever team paper over an energy weakness. In practice, none of it creates energy out of nothing. If your system empties the battery faster than your rivals does, no button and no wing setting gives you the electricity back. You just get to choose where you run out. On the worst runs this season, the Ferrari gives up something like 20 kilometers per hour to its rivals on the way down to a corner, and that gap is still there. Even the new active aero, the movable wings that flatten out on the straights and tilt back up for the corners, cannot hide an energy problem like that. The wing can cut your drag. It cannot refill your battery. The most telling reaction did not even come from Ferrari. Kimi Antonelli, sitting in the cool-down room after Austria, said the Ferrari ahead of him was deploying so strangely that he nearly ran into the back of Leclerc into turn 1. When a rival driver notices your energy problem from inside his own cockpit, at nearly full speed, it is not a small thing. It is the kind of weakness the whole grid can see. Hamilton is so sure something is wrong that he has pushed his own team to dig into it and find where the speed is going. This is not a driver making excuses after a bad day. Sit with how strange it is for a second. One of the most successful drivers ever to sit in a Formula One car, at a team that has won more races than anyone in the sport's history. That is not a small setup quirk you dial out overnight. That is a driver staring at a hole in the car, and a team now heading to the exact track where that hole gets torn wide open. And this is the part that matters most for Spa, the part that does not fully add up. A flap is an aerodynamic part. Deployment is an energy problem. Taking the flap off cuts drag, which helps the car reach a higher top speed. It does nothing to refill the battery. One detailed look at Ferrari's situation put it bluntly. This is a problem baked deep into how the whole energy system is designed, and it cannot be solved with a quick engine tweak or a clever new setting on a Friday afternoon. Ferrari knows that better than anyone, which is exactly why the Spa move is a sacrifice and not a cure. And here is what makes Spa so loaded. The last power track, Silverstone, was supposed to be the disaster that exposed all of this, and it flipped. Hamilton feared the long flat-out runs, then took sprint pole and called his own panic a false alarm, and Leclerc went and won the race outright, with even Toto Wolff pointing out that Ferrari had warned everyone about their energy and then simply were not slow. So the doubters have a point. Maybe the weakness is smaller than Hamilton fears, but Silverstone hid a warning inside the win. Hamilton lost second place late on, and he did not lose it on a straight. He lost it in the pit lane on a safety car call that went against him. The pace was there, the margin was not. Ferrari can win a power track when everything falls their way. Spa is the question of what happens when it does not, and it is a far more brutal power track than Silverstone ever was. If you are into this level of detail, the real engineering behind what Ferrari and Mercedes are actually fighting over, subscribe. Slipstream Stories takes apart the 2026 title fight like this every week. Now, back to the track that decides all of it. Zoom out for a moment, past the paddock and the reports, to what is actually at stake here. This is not a team tinkering for fun. This is a Ferrari with Lewis Hamilton in it, chasing a championship it is losing, walking into the one race that punishes its single biggest flaw. So here is what Ferrari is actually doing about it, and why it counts as a gamble rather than a gift. Reporting from Italy says the plan for Spa is to run the SF26 without flicktail mode for the first time this season, no blown flap. The team has already tried a version of the idea in practice, handing the car to their young reserve driver, Dino Beganovic, in the first session at the Austrian Grand Prix to gather clean data on a lower drag configuration. The logic is simple to say and painful to accept. Give up the cornering downforce the flap provides, take back the 7 horsepower it was costing, and turn the SF26 into a car built to survive Spa's straights rather than shine in its corners. And Spa does not forgive hesitation. It is the longest lap on the calendar, a circuit where cars spend most of the lap at full throttle. They fire up the hill out of Eau Rouge and Raidillon, that famous uphill flick that drivers take almost flat, and then stretch out along the Kemmel Straight, one of the great overtaking spots in the whole sport. It is a place where a slow car in a straight line is not just at a disadvantage, it is a sitting target, easy prey for anything with more top speed behind it. If you are going to fade at the top end anywhere, Spa is where it costs you the most. For 2026, the rule makers have handed Spa a record number of the new active aero zones, 5 separate points on the lap where drivers can flatten their wings and chase top speed. A car with less drag and cleaner aerodynamic efficiency stands to gain more from those zones than a heavy draggy one. On the face of it, stripping the Ferrari down suits this track almost perfectly. That is the case for the sacrifice, and it is a strong one. Picture how it plays out on track. Hamilton comes out of the final chicane, flattens the wing, and hits the long climb toward the finish line with a car that finally is not fighting its own drag. If it works, he holds a higher top speed, exactly where the Mercedes have been walking away from him all season, and suddenly the straights stop being the place he loses the race. That is the whole prize. A Ferrari that can defend into the braking zones instead of surrendering the position 200 meters earlier. On a track where the Kemmel Straight decides so many battles, even a small gain in top speed changes who overtakes whom, and that is the difference Ferrari is chasing when they take the flap off. The Beganovic test is the tell that Ferrari is serious. Teams do not hand a valuable practice session to a reserve driver on a whim. They do it when they need clean, honest data on a configuration they are genuinely considering, without burning one of their race drivers' limited running. Putting the young Swede in the car in Austria to run a lower drag setup was Ferrari quietly checking their homework weeks before Spa on whether a stripped car actually does what they hope. You do not run that experiment unless the idea is real. But nothing here is confirmed, and that matters more than the drama around it. The Spa plan traces back to a single strand of Italian reporting, not to Ferrari standing up and announcing anything. Nobody at the team, not Vasseur, not the technical side, not Hamilton or Leclerc, has said on the record that the flap is coming off. It is reported, it is plausible, and it is also weather dependent. If Spa is wet, and Spa is wet more often than almost anywhere else in the sport, a low drag setup becomes the wrong call, and the whole plan can be shelved before Saturday. So treat it as what it is. A strong, sourced expectation, not a promise. What is clear is that Ferrari arrives at Spa ready to bet its cornering strength against a straight line problem, and nobody, not even Ferrari, knows yet if the maths works. While everyone focuses on the flap coming off, a bigger picture is quietly moving in the background, and it changes how you should read Spa. Removing flicktail mode is a setup choice. It trims drag so the car can reach a higher top speed. It does not touch the deployment problem at all. The battery will still empty at the same point on the straight. The electrical side will still fade near the top end. What Ferrari is doing is lowering the wall the car has to push through, not handing the car more energy to push with. The real fix, the one that actually attacks deployment, is reportedly further down the road. Ferrari is said to be working toward a genuine power unit evolution later in the season, a turbo-focused upgrade that has been talked about internally as their next real step, aimed at a race weekend still weeks away. That is where the energy story could actually change, not at Spa. So, if you sit down to watch the Belgian Grand Prix expecting Hamilton to suddenly stop losing the ends of straights, you may be watching for the wrong thing entirely. What the flap removal can realistically buy is a higher terminal speed and a car that defends better into the braking zones. At Spa, that can be the whole difference between keeping a Mercedes bottled up behind you and being swallowed on the run to Les Combes. What it cannot buy is the smooth, endless deployment that lets Mercedes keep pulling when everyone else has run dry. Ferrari is treating the symptom, because the symptom is the thing they can treat this weekend. The cause has to wait. And that gap between what they can fix now and what they actually need to fix is the whole reason this title fight still looks the way it does. There is a quiet danger in a fix like this too. When you strip downforce off a car to chase straight line speed, you take grip out of the corners to do it. Spa is not only straights, it has some of the fastest, most demanding corners in the world in its middle sector, the kind of long, committed curves where rear grip is everything, and a nervous car will punish a driver instantly. So the sacrifice cuts both ways. Ferrari might claw back speed on the Kemmel straight and then hand some of it straight back through the middle of the lap, where the car now has less of the very downforce the flap used to provide. Getting that balance right, trimming just enough drag without gutting the corners, is the real skill in what they are attempting. And they will only find out if they judged it correctly once the car is actually out there. Step back and look at where this really leaves them, because the numbers explain the urgency. Hamilton sits third in the championship on 147 points, 32 behind the leader. And that leader is not Verstappen, and it is not Hamilton. It is 19-year-old Kimi Antonelli in the Mercedes on 179 points, with Russell second on 154. Mercedes, the team with the better deployment, leads the Constructors' Championship on 333. Ferrari sits second on 255. A gap of 78 points, built largely on a weakness that lives on exactly the kind of track that comes next. All of that is why a flap costing 7 horsepower is suddenly worth tearing off a winning car. Every straight where Hamilton fades is a place Mercedes bank more points. Every weekend the deployment gap stays open, the title drifts a little further out of reach. And the cruel part is the timing. There are only so many races left in the season, and Mercedes are not standing still while Ferrari works this out. A 78-point gap does not close by accident. It closes when the trailing team stops leaking performance on the exact tracks that should suit them and starts converting pace into results. Spa is one of those tracks. Waste it. And the maths gets a lot harder very quickly. Ferrari cannot afford to wait quietly for the real power unit fix and let Mercedes run clear in the meantime. So they are doing the only thing available to them at Spa. Change what they can change, accept what they cannot, and find out on track whether trimming drag is enough to hang on until the real upgrade finally lands. The honest state of it right now is simple. Nobody knows if it works. The car has not turned a wheel at Spa. The reported plan could survive contact with a dry weekend or fall apart in the first drop of rain. And even if the flap comes off exactly as described, it fixes the drag and leaves the deeper problem sitting right where it was, waiting for a fix that is still weeks away. Ferrari is not removing Hamilton's biggest problem this weekend. It is making a calculated bet that it can work around that problem for one race, on the single track where working around it is hardest of all. So watch Spa for what it really is. Not a victory lap and not a miracle cure. A test. When Hamilton lines up on that grid and the wings drop flat down the Kemmel straight, you are watching the exact moment Ferrari finds out whether stripping their own car was brilliant or reckless. If he holds a Mercedes behind him through the speed traps, the gamble worked, and this title fight is very much alive. If he fades in the last 200 meters the way he has all season, then the flap was never the real problem, and deep down everyone already knew it. As of today, the cars have not run. The Belgian Grand Prix is still ahead, the plan is still reported rather than confirmed, and the deeper fix is still weeks down the road. This story is not over. Not even close. If you want the breakdown of what Ferrari's next power unit upgrade actually changes, and whether it can genuinely close the gap to Mercedes, that one is coming. Subscribe so you are there when it lands.